I moved into the small, single-story house on Crestwood Street in the second week of January. I was 34, freshly divorced, and starting over with nothing but a few boxes of clothes and an old television. It was the kind of neighborhood where people kept their blinds drawn and their garage doors shut. Nobody knew my name, and honestly, I preferred it that way. The silence was heavy, but it was mine. The only exception to the neighborhood's cold routine was the old man who lived directly across the street. His name was Mr. Hale. I only knew his name because it was printed in faded, peeling vinyl letters on his dented metal mailbox. Every single morning at exactly 7:15, I would walk out to my car to head to work. And every single morning, without fail, Mr. Hale would be standing at his front window, the first floor, left side, right behind the thin lace curtains. He would raise his right hand and wave. It wasn't a quick, energetic wave. It was slow, stiff, and deliberate. A mechanical side-to-side motion, like a man performing a chore he had done every day of his life. The first few times it caught me off guard. I just gave a quick, awkward nod and got into my car. But by the second week, it became a routine. I started looking for him. I would walk down my driveway, look across the asphalt, and wait for the hand to rise. When it did, I would raise my hand and wave back. In a strange, pathetic way, it became the only real human contact I had during those dark winter months. I always meant to walk across the pavement, knock on his door, and properly introduce myself. I kept telling myself I would do it over the weekend, but I just kept putting it off. I was too tired, too buried in my own head. By late March, the winter frost was finally starting to melt into a gray, muddy spring. One Saturday afternoon, I was out in my front yard raking up dead leaves when a silver sedan pulled into Mr. Hale's driveway. A woman in her late 40s got out. She looked exhausted, her arms full of junk mail and plastic grocery bags. I figured it was his daughter. She started sorting through the mailbox, tossing flyers directly into a plastic bin she had brought with her. Thinking it was finally time to be a good neighbor, I dropped my rake and walked across the street. "Hi there," I said, offering a small, polite smile. "I'm Dan from across the street." The woman startled slightly, then offered a faint, tired smile. "Oh, hello. I'm Sarah. My father owned this house." "Mr. Hale, right?" I nodded toward the front window. "Yeah, I just wanted to stop by and say hello. I see him every morning when I leave for work. At exactly 7:15, he's always right there at the window, waving at me. Honestly, in a neighborhood this quiet, it's been a really nice routine. It's incredibly sweet." Sarah stopped sorting the mail. Her hands froze over the plastic bin. The faint smile vanished from her face, leaving it completely blank and pale. She turned her head slowly, looking at me with wide, hollow eyes. "What did you say?" Her voice was barely a whisper. "Your dad," I said, my smile faltering as a strange, sudden unease crept into my chest. "He stands at the left window every morning and waves. At 7:15. Sarah swallowed hard. She dropped the handful of letters she was holding. They fluttered onto the damp concrete of the driveway. "Dan, my father passed away quietly in his sleep on February 9th. The house has been entirely empty since then. I've only been coming by on weekends to clear out his things." I stood there, the cool spring wind cutting right through my jacket. I counted back the days in my head. February 9th. That was over a month ago. It was currently March 23rd. My mind spun, trying to find a logical anchor, a simple explanation to stop the sudden violent hammering in my ribs. "No, I must have mixed up the timing," I stammered, letting out a dry, forced laugh that sounded incredibly hollow. "I work long hours. The days just blur together. I probably just remembered it from January and my brain turned it into a daily habit. Silly mistake." Sarah didn't laugh. She just nodded slowly, her eyes tracking past my shoulder, staring intensely at the dark, empty windows of my own house. "Yeah," she muttered softly. "A mistake." I said a rushed goodbye, walked back across the street, and locked my front door. I sat on my couch for hours, staring out the window at the dark house opposite mine. I told myself she was right. I told myself I was lonely, stressed from the divorce, and that my mind was playing tricks on me. I had imagined it. It was just a trick of the light on the glass, or a reflection of the morning sun. But the next morning I woke up at 7 o'clock. My alarm hadn't even gone off yet. I got dressed in total silence, my hands trembling slightly as I tied my shoes. At exactly 7:10, I walked out to my car. I didn't look at the house across the street. I got into the driver's seat, closed the door, and gripped the steering wheel with both hands. I didn't turn the key. I just sat there, my eyes locked onto the digital clock on my dashboard. 7:13, 7:14, 7:15. Slowly, against every screaming instinct in my body, I turned my head and looked across the street at the first-floor window on the left. The thin lace curtain shifted. It didn't blow in a breeze. It was pulled back from the inside by pale, thin fingers. And then, from the deep shadows of the unlit room, a hand rose. A slow, pale hand. It began to move side to side in that same mechanical, deliberate motion. My breath caught in my throat. The air in my car felt instantly freezing. I didn't wave back. I slammed my key into the ignition, put the car in reverse, and tore out of the driveway, the tires screeching against the asphalt. I spent the entire day at my desk at work staring blankly at my computer screen, unable to eat a single bite of food. The image of that moving curtain burned into the back of my eyelids. When I got home that evening, the terror had turned into a desperate, obsessive need to understand. I couldn't live like this. I sat at my laptop and began digging into the history of the neighborhood. Crestwood Street was old, and I managed to find an archive of an old, defunct neighborhood web forum from the early 2000s. I scrolled through pages of complaints about barking dogs and missed trash pickups until I found a thread titled, "Strange Occurrences at 412 Crestwood." That was Mr. Hale's address. The posts were from 12 years ago. One neighbor, a woman who lived 2 doors down, wrote about seeing strange, shifting blue lights inside the house late at night when the Hales were supposed to be asleep. But it was the second comment that made my blood run cold. Another resident had written, "Has anyone else noticed the person standing in their front left window? I walk my dog at 3 in the morning, and there is always someone standing perfectly still behind the curtain just staring out. It's creepy. Mr. Hale is only in his 50s. He shouldn't have that much trouble sleeping." This wasn't a recent thing. This was a pattern that went back decades, long before Mr. Hale was ever elderly or sick. The next weekend, I saw Sarah's silver sedan pull into the driveway again. I forced myself to walk over. I needed to know more, but I had to be careful. I didn't want her to think I was a lunatic. I offered to help her carry a heavy box of old books to her trunk, and as we wrapped up, I tried to bring it up casually. "Sarah," I said softly, keeping my eyes on the box, "if you don't mind me asking, did your dad have any health issues in his final months? Like, was he confused or did he have bad insomnia? My grandfather used to wander the house at night before he passed." Sarah paused, holding the trunk lid open. She stared into the dark carpet of the trunk for a long, agonizing moment before answering. "No," she said, her voice dropping to a flat, hard tone. "Dad didn't wander. In fact, for the last year of his life, he couldn't even make it to the front of the house. He was entirely bedridden in the back bedroom. He was too weak to stand." She paused, wiping a strand of hair from her face. "It's funny you mention that window, though. He used to stand there and wave at people decades ago, back when my mother was still alive." He would wait for her to come home from work. But he completely gave it up after she died in '98. He told me the window felt wrong. He said someone else was waiting there. She slammed the trunk shut, got into her car, and drove away without another word. I didn't sleep at all that night. I lay flat on my back in bed, staring up at the dark plaster of my bedroom ceiling. Every little creak of my house sounded like a footstep. The night dragged on, second by agonizing second, until the darkness outside my window began to soften into the pale, sickly gray of dawn. I looked at the digital clock on my nightstand. It was 7:14 a.m. I held my breath, my body completely rigid beneath the sheets. The neighborhood outside was dead silent. Then, right at 7:15, a sound cut through the quiet. It didn't come from inside my house. It came from across the street, echoing through the cold morning air. Tap. It was a single, sharp sound. The distinct noise of a fingernail or a ring knocking hard against a pane of glass. I didn't look. I pulled the heavy winter blanket completely over my head, squeezing my eyes shut, pressing my hands over my ears. I stayed perfectly still, shivering in the dark of my own bed, until the sun was high in the sky and the clock read noon. I put the house on the market the very next week. I couldn't take it anymore. The daily terror was eroding my sanity. I stopped leaving for work at 7:15. I either left at 6 in the morning in the pitch black or waited until 8, keeping my eyes glued strictly to the floorboards of my porch as I ran to my car. It took 8 long months to finally sell the place. The housing market was slow, but by November, a young couple finally made an offer. The day before the closing, my realtor, a pleasant woman named Linda, stopped by to have me sign the final disclosures. She brought her laptop to show me the finalized digital listing documents. "The virtual tour looked wonderful, Dan," Linda said brightly, scrolling through the high-resolution exterior photographs of my property. "We really caught the house in the best light." She clicked on a wide-angle shot taken from the middle of the street, showing the front of my house perfectly framed by the autumn trees. But the camera angle was wide enough that it also captured a portion of the house directly across the street. My eyes bypassed my own home and locked instantly onto the left side of the screen. There, in the brilliant, clear morning sunlight, was Mr. Hale's old house. Behind the dusty glass of the first-floor left-hand window, the lace curtain was pulled back. Standing in the dark gap was a tall, distorted, pitch-black shape. It didn't look human. It looked like a shadow that had been stretched and twisted, its form blurring at the edges. And raised right against the glass, perfectly captured by the high-speed camera lens, was a pale, skeletal hand, caught mid-motion. "It's a beautiful neighborhood," Linda murmured, completely oblivious, her fingers scrolling past the image to the next document. "The buyers are going to love how peaceful it is. It's a shame that house across the street is still empty, though. It's been totally vacant since February." I didn't say a word. I just signed the papers, handed her the keys, and left. I live in a high-rise apartment in the city now, on the 12th floor, surrounded by concrete, bright lights, and the constant noisy roar of traffic. There are no houses across from me. There are no windows close enough for anyone to see inside. But every single morning, when the clock on my stove ticks over to 7:15, a cold tightness grips my chest. I stay away from the balcony. I look at the floor. Because deep down, in the quietest, darkest part of my mind, I am absolutely terrified that if I look out into the open air, someone will be looking back, waiting for me to wave.